Welcome to our 6v6 PvP updated tier list for the new update that is now live for both PC and Switch. If you're excited for more Coromon and other Monster Naming content, please make sure to like and subscribe, and let's jump on in. As always, we're starting our list with Goldbeak, who's going all the way up to the S tier. A just monumental change and shift for Goldbeak, who was very squarely in the C- tier for both 6v6 and 3v3, but it now has access to things like spikes, which are really good. It also can remove hazards. It has great typing. It has a really good ability in Tactical Retreat, which gives it HP every time it leaves the battlefield. And it also can run things like the Maca, the P.E.K.K.A. Stone, in addition to a Revitalizer Gem. Overall, the best utility mon in the game, the best hazard user in the game most likely, and arguably the best hazard removal in the game. It's an absolute monster. It may not sweep teams, but it's the absolute glue that holds most top tier teams together. And for that reason, it's all the way up in the S tier. Next up is Hountrion, who, although very good and much improved, is not quite as good or quite as improved as Goldbeak. And it'll be an A- tier, probably the premier physical electric attacker in the metagame right now. It also gets access to Electro Mines, which is really cool. The set you typically run will be something like Fast Strike, Power Talons, Ball of Darkness, and I believe it's Poison Chomp with a Pista Stone. It also has the Menacing trait, which is going to lower your opponent's attack by one stage. It's decently bulky, has really good move pool overall, and because of its increase in attack going from the main branch to this new update, it's a really great physical attacker for teams that need that. Don't sleep on Hountrion. I don't like its design. We're not ranking its design today. We're only ranking its ability to perform in 6v6. And it does that at an A- level. Armadon is a more difficult Coromon to rank, and for that reason I have it in the B tier. It has the tools to be a cool physical tank that can also run the P.E.K.K.A. Stone. You can also run an offense set if you wanted to. It feels like, though, as we go through our list, you'll notice that some normal types have a better niche, and I'm not sure if that's the right term, or they're just more effective in what they do than Armadon. And it's not quite as popular as some other normal types, so we haven't seen it as often. But I could very well see, as we go through this new update, this thing rising up into the A- tier, because it has a really robust physical defense and attack. It can also be supplemented, like I mentioned, with the P.E.K.K.A. Stone. So B for now, but I can definitely see this increasing. Try it out a couple times, see what you think. But as of now, a little bit harder to tier compared to some of the other mons on our list. Caradune very recently got some sneaky updates that have brought it from the C- tier to the B- tier, which is a very respectable jump. It got a decent upgrade in its defense from about 165 to 192-ish. It lost the ability to use Crunch, but it got Poison Chomp, which is awesome, and very likely has some other little tools coming its way as we get through the patch and start getting some future updates. There are probably some other sand types you'd prefer to use over this, like Kyraptor and Megalobite, but it's starting to build out its niche as a really bulky sand type with some interesting coverage and some tools coming its way, but for now, B- tier. If we were doing these ranks based off of anything other than the Coromon's ability to function in 6v6, like for example its potential or its design, or other just intrinsic things you can't really quantify, A- at least tier, but Ashclops unfortunately just isn't that good right now. We're gonna put it in the C tier because it has some things going for it. It does set auto heat wave, which is cool. It also is a levitating mon, which means it doesn't take as much damage from entry hazards, or it avoids like spikes because it's floating. It also has a really high physical attack stat and some decent coverage. But as you're going to see as we go through this list, other fire types just really outclass it in terms of damage dealer or utility or just overall glue for your team. So for that reason, it's C. Similar to Armadon, I can see as we go through this new patch and update, it becoming more popular and people finding a better use for it. But as of now, it's really below average, and there are other fire types I'd recommend using over Ashclops. Big Bad Ucaclaw is going up to A+ tier. Absolute monster. Run the Pista Stone, click Head Crash or Splatter if you're in the rain, and just watch things fall by the wayside. One of the most reliable switch-ins is Chontoad, whose viability is really tied to its ability to check or switch into Ucaclaw. Absolute monster. Not much else to say. Prep for it or bring it yourself. Ideally do both, but definitely a A+ tier mon, possibly S tier, and one of the highest damage dealers we have right now in the Coromon metagame. Man, I remember the days when Rhynobuzz was on every 6v6 and 3v3 team, and unfortunately it's fallen off a little bit. We'll put it in B- tier. It's still a decent tank, but I think the introduction of the Amaka Stones and the Peck Stones have made other Coromon bulkier and have taken Rhynobuzz's position as like a bulky damage dealer. It still has really decent coverage. It can run a tank set or more like support oriented set pretty effectively, but we do have some more offensively based electric types you'd probably use over Rhynobuzz. I'm not a huge fan of electric type overall. I feel like they don't have a great matchup in this meta right now. I do think it's getting some tools down the line that's going to really improve it, but until it gets some of those changes, only B- tier for now, and there are other electric types you probably want to check out over Rhynobuzz. In my first ever set of tier lists before I got into the competitive scene for Coromon, I had Eclyptor as like A or A- or something like that, and it wasn't that good. I'm actually going to put it A- again, and it is that good now, and it actually got a really sneaky update that increases HP, which is really good for Eclyptor because it's really frail. There are also some other Coromon who got nerfed a little bit, which made this even better, but Eclyptor is arguably the best mix attacker in the game, one of the fastest Coromon in the game as well, with two great traits it can use to support your team or itself. You can either run it specially focused or physically focused on the offensive sides. Has, like I mentioned, really great typing. So if you are looking for a fast mix attacker, potential cleaner, or if you want to run a choice item to make it a breaker, you definitely can. Definitely give Eclyptor a try. It also has a cool design, so try it out for sure. I'm always really excited to talk about Eclyptor. I can do it for days and hours and make so many videos. Krybeast, on the other hand, I do not like. And it is C+ tier, and I think that's a unbiased and fair opinion. Is it? We'll never actually know. If you do need something to check ice types, potentially water types, and you want a special wall of sorts, Krybeast is a pretty good option. I do think its pre-evolutions are actually better than Krybeast, so I would opt to use one of those, and they'd probably be like in the B or B+ tier specifically. Shiny is typically the trait you're going to use, and then you'll have some combination of like Ice Wall, I think it's Intensify. There's also its Ice proficiency as well, and then a coverage move, which I think is like Knockdown or Smackdown. So it's not bad. Overall though, there are better Ice type options, and its pre-evolutions outclass it. So for that reason, it's C+ tier. And I hate this design, so that's another reason why it's C+ tier. Infinix is another underwhelming fire type going straight to the C tier, but hopefully we'll see some changes coming up. We're also not going over all the different changes that we see in the Coromon going from the base game to the update, because I'm hoping another video about that, and we do have some patch notes. It did see some stat buffs and increases. It also got access to hazards, and it got access to hazard control. But it's hard to fit on your team, especially when there are other fire types you probably want to run, and because Goldbeak just does its job so much better in terms of setting hazards or removing them. It has some decent offensive stats, and it has some decent coverage, but overall it's an underwhelming pick for your team in 6v6, and I recommend using another fire type like Vulbrute, even Magmilus over this, to be honest. Serpike is sliding all the way up to the B+ tier, and I'm really excited to put it there because it has a cool design. Its pre-evolution is also very viable, possibly even A or A+ tier in my opinion, because I love it so much. It's fast, it hits decently hard, or you could even run it as a utility option, which most people do. It gets access to spikes, which is awesome. It also has a good ability in what is basically spike body, in that there's a percentage of the damage that's done to your opponent for making contact. Then you can add the Quanta Rock, and it does, I think it's like 35 to 40% for each contact hit on Serpike, which is really, really good. If you need a normal type and you want something with utility, with spikes, something that's fast, definitely try out Serpike. Really solid B+ tier mon. The only other normal type I think is going to end up above this is Goldbeak, and as you can see, Goldbeak is probably the best Coromon in the game right now. So just goes to show that Serpike is still a really good normal type, just maybe not as good as Goldbeak. I hate to see it with Deecie, but it's still just C+. It doesn't hit hard enough. It has some really nice abilities that allow it to take less damage from super effective hits and deal more damage with super effective hits. But overall, things like Hountrion and, I forgot its name. Let me scroll down. Toravolt, how could I forget Toravolt's name? Are going to outclass this term in terms of damage dealers, and they're a better bulky Coromon that you're going to want to use over Deecie. It does get priority electric moves. It does also get, I believe, Nasty Plot now, or the equivalent, which is going to increase your special attack by 2 stages. But overall, underwhelming, and there are better Coromon that you'd want to use over this, unless you just really like AC/DC, which if you do, then this is the Coromon for you. Oh, Kyraptor is still so good. A- tier. It lost Crunch, which means it lost some coverage against water types that like to switch into its sand moves, but it got the Pistostone, which made it even better at what it does, and very likely will be getting some other tools and toys to play with to be a better support Coromon as well. It can also decently run something with the Maka Stone or Pekka Stone if you so choose, so it does have some utility if you wanted to do that, but overall still a really great revenge killer and wall breaker at the same time with decent bulk. It's one of those Coromon that you always have to have an answer for, or at least account for in your team building, so similar to Ucaclaw, either bring it, or plan for it, or do both, but it's really good, and I love Kyraptor, A- tier. Gelaquad has high-key become really good, B+ tier. Pistostone, like a lot of the mons that we're seeing in these higher tiers, it's probably its best set. It gets great coverage though, it gets sand coverage, electric, and water coverage, and normal I believe. It also is immune to poison, which means you can't have its attack lowered by the poison status, which is really good for it. And overall, I think it is the, other than Ucaclaw, sorry I saw Ucaclaw in A+, other than Ucaclaw, the best physical attacker on the water side. It's kind of bulky, it does float, so it does avoid hazards, which is really, really good. And it's something that you can kind of pair with Ucaclaw as well. If Ucaclaw is running Humidifier, giving you that boost to some of your Hydro Punches is never a bad thing. Don't sleep on this. If you see it on the opponent's side, it's going to hit really, really hard with this Pistostone set or Overcharger, depending on what set it's running. But give it a try. Try it out. I like Gelaquad. My girl Skelatops, just not cutting it. I'm putting it C+ tier. I would entertain arguments that it is better than that. Its coverage is actually surprisingly good. I think it gets sand, heavy, and foul coverage, which is nothing to sneeze at. It also has an ability that is going to lower physical attacks against it, like it's some like resistance, I think it's 25%. And it has sky high attack, but its special defense is really low, it's not very fast, and as you can see, we're already starting to see a lot of sand types just outclass it in Caradune already. And we have Kyraptor, Megalobite still waiting in the wings, and I can already see two others that need to be listed that might outclass it. So overall, hard for me to find a place for it on most teams. It does have great design, has great coverage, could be a surprise factor, so don't sleep on it, but probably other sand types you want to use over this. Mudma, C- tier, don't use it. It's not good yet. I hope it gets some new things soon. It's just not that great. Its best set's probably like a bulky booster with replenish, but it might be losing that. There are so many other good ghost types that we're not going to spend more time on it. Don't use Mudma. I feel bad saying that. Let's move on. Arcturos is going all the way to B+, and because of a certain nerf to a certain moth who ran a certain trait, this might be the best Antarctic user we have now in the metagame. So you'll probably see this paired with Bear quite a bit. You can run either a special wall set, special tank, or likely now an offensive set, now that Glamoth is probably running different sets due to its nerf. But if you do need those things and you're trying to replace some of that utility that Glamoth gave you with setting Antarctic, Arcturos is a great Coromon to think about, and its pre-evolution is also really good, so both two great ice options you have from the B+ tier. Oh man, at the time of this recording, it's spooky season, and Grimmask is by far the spookiest Coromon I've ever seen. Maybe the spookiest monster I've ever seen in a video game. It's terrifying. It did get some buffs from the main branch to this new update, and it recently got Hazard. I think Curse Ground is the Hazard that it got. It's still maybe not as good as some of the other ghost types you're going to see on this list, but it is a really good setup mon, and if you do let it get set up, you're in for a world of pain, so just keep that in mind. It's perfect sprite, hit or miss. I know we're not judging Coromon based off design, it's supposed to be based off just 6v6 by ability, but it's factoring a little bit here for me. Anyway, it's an okay ghost type, probably better ghosts that you'd want to use like Orochi potentially, Purrghast, Eclyptor, but if you like its design, you like its ability to use hazards and boosts at the same time, consider using it, but you'll likely find better options for that ghost type on your team. Next up is Magmilus, who is tough for me to tier. So I'm going to put it at the top of C+ tier. It is very bulky now in both HP and special defense. It is also decently fast, and I believe it has decent special attack as well. It also has good coverage. I don't know why it's not used more. It has some really niche annoying sets that if we don't ban evasion claws in like the tournament you're in, if you're playing online, that are really hard to deal with. I just don't see it that much, and I feel like it's kind of teetering on what its niche needs to be. I think similar to some other Coromon that we ranked earlier in the video, I do think over time this will rise into like the B or B+ tier once you figure out what its best sets are. But as of today, And I think it also gets hazards too. I think it's blazing coals as well. So it has all the pieces it needs to be really good. I'm just still figuring out where it fits. So for that reason, it's C+ tier. But try it out and let me know if you're finding a better set for it and if you think it should be higher, because I can definitely see this thing rising as our metagame continues to define itself and evolve. Oh man, Lumasect, C-. They carry me in my playthrough, but like Mudma, it just doesn't offer much. I know there have been attempts to make this thing more of a utility mon, and I think its pre-evolution is actually way better than this. I think this pre-evolution is like probably like a B or B+ mon, but Lumasect's not that good. Use something else, use a different electric type, or no electric type, but Lumasect right now it's not very viable. Cyberbite though is super viable. It's really bulky. It's surprisingly bulky with its normal typing. You can either run Maka or P.E.K.K.A. You can also run Overclocker, which is going to match the opponent's attack stat, which is, I think, just an amazing trait. It also has sky-high special attack, so you can run it as like max HP, max special defense, or you could run like max HP, max special attack to catch things off guard. It gets priority. Overall, it's really, I think it's an awesome Coromon. It has a great design, has a definite niche in the meta right now if you want like a general switch in or kind of just like a bulky thing to dish damage out. So for that reason, it's B+ tier. I think initially in my rankings it was like B- or C+. Definitely has improved, and it gives you a lot of utility and flexibility. So if you're trying to plug some holes, consider Cyberbite and some of the sets you can run with it, because I really enjoyed using it. Oh man, the king is dead. Glamoth is no longer the undisputed best Coromon in the game. It has lost Antarctic, and it has seen an increase in its speed stat from 161 to 190 to make up for that, but is no longer the undisputed best Coromon in the game. Out of respect for what Glamoth has done, and the game is one for me, I will put it in the A+ tier. It's probably closer to A or A-. I haven't had a chance to use this into its most recent nerf a few days ago, but big changes for Glamoth. Keep that in mind. Let's see how it does. It's going to run some new sets. It'll still probably be really solid, don't get me wrong. It'll still be really solid, but it's no longer the just best Coromon undisputed in the game. I hope it can take a title back. It's been a long run, but I'm excited to see what's next for Glamoth. It's still really good though, so, you know, still try it out. Alright, Milidont, C+. I think that we're going to see Milidont become really good though, because it has just sky-high defense. So if you need a really high defense, like base 300 something odd defense Coromon, definitely use this. I think it's going to be a decent switch into Bear, a great switch into Kyraptor, Hountrion, Serpike. I'm just looking at the list, even Goldbeak. So I do think eventually it's going to rise up. It's not very popular now, and there are other sand types you're using like Kyraptor, Caradune, potentially Megalobite, so it's hard to fit on your team. But I do think its time is coming. I think it's going to increase in its viability and its popularity. I hope to be a champion for it as time goes on. But for now, C+ tier. But keep in mind, if you need something really bulky on the defensive side with some utility like hazards, I think as a stat spreader as well, definitely consider Milidont. Chontoad, B tier. Probably going to run this with max HP, max defense, and the Maka Stone, and then like Splash and like whatever other moves you're going to have on it. But it's a good switch into things like Ucaclaw, Kyraptor as well, which as you're seeing are two very, very threatening mons. So I think it's best that it will be a defensive set. It did, I believe, get an increase in its special attack as well very recently, so it does have some offense, but overall, it's a bulky water, and as you can see, you don't have too many bulky waters on our list, so you can usually find a spot for it with Ucaclaw on your team already. But give it a try. It's a cool Coromon, cool design, and I think you will enjoy. Oh, it's trait. It gets toxic skin, so there's a chance that it will poison the opponent, lowering their attack as well, making it even more effective in walling them. So overall, pretty solid. Sandril is right behind in the B tier. Its main thing as a sand type, or main niche or differentiator, is going to be wet coat, which means in dehumidifier or rain weather, it's going to get increased speed, which means it's a interesting kind of weather sweeper if you wanted to use it that way, and that you could have like Chontoad using humidifier as its trait, and then Sandril, so you're not doubling up on water types too quickly. We also have Ucaclaw with humidifier and Sandril, so it forms some pretty interesting cores. It has decent special attack and physical attack, so it's a good mix attacker. But like I mentioned, overall it's going to give you some unique offenses on your most likely rain team if you decide to use it. Blizzian is like the most average Coromon in the game. It's like whenever you're like, if you're a sports fan, like they'll do the average of like NBA players like 6'6", 215. I feel like Blizzian is like the average Coromon. It has like one like high base power ice attack. It has ice typing, which is solid. It has some niches. I think with Glamoth getting a little bit of a nerf, it's a little bit better as well. I think B tier is solid for it. It can do a little bit of everything. I'm not exactly too familiar with it, to be honest. I know I've seen it run offensive. I've seen it run support sets. I've seen it, I think it's hazards as well. Don't quote me on that one. I think it might not have hazards actually. But it does a lot of things okay, and for that reason we'll put it in the B tier. But likely you're going to run things like Arcturos or Glamoth over it, or even one of Arcturos's pre-evolutions. But it just feels like a solid B tier, so we'll leave it there for now. Man, Vulbrute's still as good as ever. I'm going to put it in A tier. I know some people have it in their A+ tier or even close to their S tier. I do think it gets a little overwhelmed if it's like your Maka switch in or P.E.K.K.A switch in. And I do think offensively I would prefer to use something like Volcadon potentially, but it's still just so good. It's really bulky, it hits very, very hard. It has a great trait that prevents you from having its stats lowered, which is just so valuable in this meta. So for those reasons, I'm going to leave it in the A tier. If you played Coromon before this new patch, you know that Vulbrute is really good. If you're playing on Switch or you're on PC and didn't switch over to the beta, it's still really good. It's not something that you have to like account for necessarily, but it's just such a good mon that it's hard not to put it on your team. Because like I mentioned, it can be a physical wall or tank, it can be a special attacker. So definitely consider Vulbrute. It's one of the best, not the best fire type. Really great design, and I highly recommend you try it out. Purrghast is a really fun Coromon to use. Its trait allows you to match the HP of your opponent when you first switch in, so you can afford not to invest a lot in HP for switching in on a bulkier mon. Typically, you're going to run the Pistol Stone, or you can even actually run Revitalizer with the move that boosts both your attack and defense. I'm blanking on it, unfortunately. I haven't played Coromon in about a week. So all the moves are in and out of my head. But they can run a boosting set, you can also run a Pistol Stone set, and it got access to fire coverage very recently, which really helps it out with all the ice types running around. It's a fun Coromon to use. It also has some really interesting support moves as well that I do believe I have up in another video, so make sure to check that out. If you're looking for a ghost type that is more flexible than some of the others, this is the one to try out. It's really fun to use, so I recommend it. Magmilus is an interesting electric type. I feel like it is outclassed by Hountrion. The big difference here is Magmilus gets, I believe, a little bit better coverage, which helps it out. But overall, I think you would typically use Hountrion as your Pistol Stone user or just physical electric type Coromon. It is a little bit bulkier, so it's more of like a max HP, max attack set, whereas like Hountrion would be max speed, max attack. And like I mentioned, it gets a little bit better coverage, so if you're looking at your team composition, you want an electric type, you're like, oh, I want this like water, for example, splatter on the mon. Then you probably go with Magmilus. It also has a decent trait as well in Magnet Pool, which is, I think, being reworked, but it helps you get some decent matchups and some free switches. But overall, really outclassed by Hountrion, so hard to put it higher. But if you really like the design of the Coromon or some of that extra coverage, then go ahead and give it a try. Swampa's an interesting Coromon because it is the water type with the highest special attack, but I feel like it's not used quite as much as Gelaquad or something like Ucaclaw. I had it in the B tier, but I'm actually going to put it in the B+ tier because I do think it's in the same realm as Gelaquad, just on the opposite side of the attacking spectrum, but it's still really, really viable. And I do believe it got a recent buff in its attack to make it a better mixed attacker overall. So if you like the idea of having an offensive water type, or looking for more special attack than physical attack, definitely try out Swampa, and I really do like its design too. On this one, you probably want to run the item that's going to boost your special attack. I don't think utility sets are going to be its main niche, mainly going to be special attacking sets instead of something like Gelaquad on your team. I am a huge fan of Octo. I think it's the best cleaner in the game with the Accuracy Stone and Motivator, which is going to boost your attack and special attack by one stage when you knock out a Coromon. In addition to having Super Drain and Ball of Darkness as your two attacking items, this thing can easily snowball into a sweep if you don't have something like Goldbeak to check it, or even something like Serpike, or your Vulbrute gets whittled down. So I definitely recommend giving Octo a try. It's definitely late game. It's not a breaker, it is just a cleaner or sweeper at the very end of the game. But if you can set it up correctly, like chip down its checks or counters or get us some hazards, it's really hard to deal with and one of my favorite Coromon to use, so I highly recommend it. Megalobite is going to join Goldbeak in the S tier. It has sky high attack, it is a sand type, which most teams are going to need. Its P.E.K.K.A Stone set is just so good for it. You can also run a boosting set if you would like to, which a lot of Switch players are probably running, or you would see in like pre-patch matches. But overall, it's just such a good Coromon to have on your team. It also brings up Sand, which is going to give it a +1 stage for critical hits, and it gets Flying Kick, so it can start firing off critical hits really easily with priority if you use Transcending. S tier Coromon, have it on your team, you won't regret it. We're going to place Toravolt right next to Hountrion. For some reason I had it in the B+ tier. I think I was trying to be too cute with it. Overall, it's like, do you want to have that physical attacker or special attacker? Do you want the Bolt Bomb or the Power Talons? Do you want Ball of Darkness being more effective? Do you want Fast Strike? So they fill very similar roles. It's just dependent, actually kind of similar to Gelaquad and Swampa. Obviously there is some nuances with each of those Coromon sets, but overall they're offensive electric types that ideally you want one of on your team. So it's a pick or choose between physical or special here, and they're both really, really awesome choices. Darikara is solid B tier. I feel like it never caught on. The idea of Darikara is like A+. Functionally though, it's more of a B+. It has amazing coverage, an ability that is going to allow you to do more damage for super effective hits, Unfortunately, it's not quite fast enough. I don't think it hits hard enough. I think it requires a little too much team support, so I have it in the B tier. I know some other people really like it. I haven't found it to be too effective in what it tries to do, so for that reason it'll be B tier, but could see it rising if we find a really good niche for it or the right team support for this Coromon. Atlantern hasn't changed much, but the meta has, so unfortunately it's B tier, whereas before it might have been A- or A. It's still a really bulky Coromon with some decent traits. It also floats, which lets it avoid spikes. It has decent offensive stats as well, so you may run like a sleeper set that's just offensive to kind of blow some things back. But I do think the metagame has become very fast-paced and offensive with the introduction of the different choice items, and I feel like Atlantern has a harder time keeping up. I do imagine some changes coming to make it more effective in its role, but for now it's just kind of average in the B tier. Orochi will put in the top of B tier. If it gets set up, it's an absolute demon. It has fully rested, it has inner peace, it has replenish, Ball of Darkness. So once it gets set up, it's an absolute demon. It's even underwhelming. I remember someone got to like +6 on me and it couldn't take out my Glamoth. I actually ended up winning that one-on-one. I thought it was gonna sweep me. So in the right circumstance, it's definitely not terrible. I do think as you get hip to its game, it's a lot less effective and threatening. But if you're not, definitely watch out, because if it starts setting up, you need to find a switch in for it, for sure. Dugtera has improved going to this update. I'm going to put it in the A- here, because I personally think it's right up there with Eclyptor in terms of being the best or second best mixed attacker, depending on how you feel about these two Coromon. You're going to want to run the Enhancer Gem, because that will give you +1 speed. And even some of its special moves have gotten buffed, like its Draco Meteor, its sand version of Draco Meteor has gotten buffed, surprisingly. And also has really good coverage as well. You can run it physically or specially based, but it's really solid. I'm really happy it's gotten better. And I do think it's legitimately an A- tier Coromon, if not better. Alright, and these last four will rapid fire. Megalobite, I'm actually going to put in the B+ tier. I want to keep talking myself into it being like A+ or A or A-. I just feel like it's really solid. Like, it's not exceedingly good, it's just really solid. So we're gonna put it in the B+ tier. It can run all kinds of sets, so I'm not gonna spend the time talking about each different kind of set, but it's so versatile. B+. Blazitar, I think I'm actually gonna put this B-. I thought about B or B+. I do think something like Octo is gonna outclass it, and we do have things like Vulbrute and other fast mons or fire mons that outclass it quite a bit. Big Bear, I'm putting an A+. Its ability Contain Power activates on its first turn, which gives you a 50% boost in the move that you're using. And you can also run Pistol Cell on top of that, basically one-shotting anything that doesn't resist or is like really heavily invested in HP and defense. Volcadon, I will put in the A tier along with Vulbrute. I think its offensive utility is better than Vulbrute's, but its defensive utility is less than Vulbrute's, and I think it's relatively equal. Actually, it's not. I'll put it in the A- tier, because after that rationale, I do think Vulbrute's a little bit better. And then Humvee, out of respect, top of B tier, because if you don't know what Humvee does, I'm not going to spoil it. It's hard to deal with, and it's still really effective in its role. It's just most people know what it does now, and some of its strategies have gotten nerfed over time. But that is our 6v6 updated tier list for the new patch that's live for Switch and PC. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. If you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. And check out our other videos on this content to make sure you're up to date on the new meta. And we'll see you next time. Alright, bye everyone.